Hello, hello. This is Charlotte.
And this is Daryl.
And we are the Bakers. How are you?
I'm doing wonderful. How you doing?
I'm good. How are you, and you? We hope you are well. We are here again to do another installment with a topic that we hope will be helpful for you in enriching your marriage.
Yes.
Now, before we begin, we want to give you an opportunity to think about going to www.enrichingyourmarriageblog.wordpress.com, and I'll say that again throughout this video. If you have a particular topic that we haven't discussed yet and you would like for us to consider, so start thinking about that. What do you think about that, hon?
I think that's a great idea because the fact that we would like to stay connected with you. We'd like for you to connect with us. And if there's something that's on your heart that you feel that you need some content, maybe some information, some wisdom, some instructions, and to help you maybe navigate through some difficulties, or maybe to help you to give you confirmation as to what you're dealing with and the way that you have dealt with it. And so it'll be a great opportunity for you to express what's on your heart as well.
All right, so we're going to get started. So in one of our sessions, we talked about selfishness.
Yes.
And so this installment, we're going to talk about selfishness and control. Are they the same?
Mm-hmm.
So in the previous video, we talked about how selfishness is or can be viewed in marriage. And so we just want to go back over a quick definition. Selfishness, according to the dictionary, is when someone is concerned excessively or exclusively with oneself. Okay? Seeking or concentrating on their own advantage, their own pleasure, their own well-being without the keyword regard for other people. Mm-hmm. And then control, because we're comparing the two, means to exercise restraining or directing influence, or the key word they use is regulate. Mm-hmm. To have power over, and in this case, a spouse. So we're talking about a person. So we want to talk a little bit more about, can those two things cohabitate well in a marriage? What do you think?
They could. They're not healthy in a marriage. Okay,
yes,
so
right.
Basically, no. If you want to be successful, you want to have a healthy marriage, they cannot exist, and you still yet be able to maintain a healthy life, a healthy marriage, mm-hmm. where you are actually growing together and creating life together.
Okay.
So when you come to when marriage is about coming together, growing together, becoming one, and also creating life together and making history.
Now, we're saying, in our opinion, based on, again, we've been married 17 years. Can you believe that, honey?
Yes.
So we've come across things in our own marriage. We've come across just things in general, talking to other couples. And so what we're saying is we don't see how these two things can contribute to a healthy marriage.
Right.
So we're going to prove our point. So for some may think that these two, when you think about selfishness, you think about control, some people may say it's autonomous or these behaviors are very similar. But selfishness is also, it's definitely can be intertwined with control. Because remember, selfishness is about what you want for you. Whereas, as we're going to explain, control, it's woven together. So for example, selfish behavior can be demonstrated when one spouse wants everything to be about them.
Yeah. Yes.
When a spouse is selfish, he or she can operate under a level of the spirit of control by influencing mm-hmm. or regulating a certain outcome. Because that's really what control is about, mm-hmm. right? Even selfishness, like they said, they're intertwined because the goal is you want a certain thing for you. Mm-hmm. You want a certain outcome. Mm-hmm. So let's talk about some examples of possible ways to identify if selfishness / control is operating in your marriage. So from a woman's perspective, and then he's going to talk about from a man's perspective. For example, think about this. A husband does not allow his wife to speak until he says so. If she is allowed to speak, he wants her to agree with him. That is what? Control sprinkled with selfishness. Think about that. Another example, when a wife is not allowed to express herself to others in public or private, that is control, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely.
Yes.
If you're unable to express yourself in a communication environment, you're communicating, because communication basically is an art and it goes two ways. And so if one person in the marriage want to dictate the outcome of every situation and control the mindset, the words that the person uses, and control the entire environment. And so one of the things you can really consider possibly is to take an assessment of the environment. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that a little bit later.
Yes. So another example, when a wife must make everything in the home, it has to be done or organized in a certain way to please her husband. That sounds like
control.
Could be control. Think about that. When a husband makes decisions about the well-being of the household that benefit him alone. Now he's married, but it benefits him alone, never considering asking his wife's opinion. That could also be control intertwined with what? Selfishness. Think about it. Another example from a woman's perspective, when a husband commands that a wife get involved with things or activities that he likes without her consent, that is control sprinkled with selfishness. So now Mr. Baker's going to talk about possible examples of how control and selfishness are intertwined from a man's perspective.
Absolutely. So a woman discounts her husband in public and private and gets mad if he disagrees. And when a wife basically has a temper tantrum, and in order to get away, that could also be a level of control.
And what do you mean by tantrum? We're not talking about like little babies, fall down on the floor, right? That's not what you mean.
No.
Give us an example of a temper tantrum from a wife.
From a wife. One example could be this, is that maybe she wants to shut down in an area that you desire to do something with her. And she may bring up your past. She may bring up a hurt. She may bring up a wound. She may bring up something to control or to manipulate the situation to cause you to shut down, and she ends up getting her way. You follow? So, or maybe starting an argument when it's not necessarily an opportune time for an argument to be on surface. So you can bring up a hurt or wound or a scar from the past, and that right there can be a level of control. Okay. So also when a wife refuses to be intimate with her husband in order to get what she wants, you see, when you get married, then of course you no longer belong to yourself, right?
Right.
You belong to each other.
Right.
And so if you belong to each other, you are giving of yourself to each other. And that's what marriage is supposed to be. When you're talking about traditional marriage, that's what marriage is supposed to be. And so also when a wife dictates how she wants things to be done without her husband's opinion. In other words, I don't need you. I am self-reliant, and I don't need your input. I don't need your opinion. I'm going to make my own decision because I am in control of the situation, and I'm in control of my life. When you're making decisions among each other, it's like really maybe negotiating, determining what is the best outcome for both parties involved, and not just thinking upon one individual. And so when a person is continuously getting their way in the situation, getting their way in the marriage, not compromising, not giving themselves to one another, or not even considering the other person's feelings or their emotions, that is a level of control. And so hopefully from these extreme examples that we can see that selfishness and control should never be a part of any marriage. Being married is about being a servant
and not a slave. Let's repeat that. Being married is about being a servant to your spouse and not a slave. So may I interject? So when we're talking about being a slave, we've seen examples where one spouse is so dominant that the other spouse can sometimes actually feel like they've lost their identity. They don't really think on their own. They just kind of go along with things. And that's not what marriage is. It's not about just conforming all the time to your spouse's desires and whims. And I think that's sometimes where people get confused when they say, wives should be submissive. Yes, submissive means you are under the authority of your spouse and not in authority as a dictator.
Right.
Because if we're going to talk about in a little bit, if you're operating under really the real meaning of love, we did an installment on that too. But if you're operating under real authority of love doesn't do certain things, right?
That's right.
Love doesn't do certain things. So it's about being selfless towards your spouse, right? But that does not mean that that person should regulate, as we keep saying, regulate or manipulate the other person. That is not what love is, and that definitely does not work in marriage. You agree?
I definitely agree. Because of the fact that when you're talking about, control or manipulation, you're really bringing in outside influences to help you to get what you want. You don't need an outside influence to help to get what you want if you're really operating in the love of God. Now that is a companion that you can incorporate in your marriage, right?
Right.
Bringing in a third person like God or the Son or the Holy Spirit, bringing in that type of assistance that you maybe really work on becoming one and becoming a servant to one another. As you serve your spouse, you're really serving yourself. As you serve your spouse, you're really doing justice to your marriage. You're doing justice to one another. And we know that men basically are givers, women are receivers. And so as we give, if there's negativity, what do you think you're going to get in return?
You're going to get the same thing. Whatever you put out, you're going to get back.
And if you give love,
yes,
love is going to come back to you. All right?
Yes.
So if you're loving yourself, no one really hates themselves. But you're supposed to love yourself as you loving your spouse.
So let's jump on that. You were talking about, basically he's talking from Ephesians 5:25 when it talks about husband, love your wives. What does that mean to love? Does love control? We keep saying those words: control, manipulate, regulate others to receive your personal fulfillment? No, that's not what love is. It is not about controlling anyone. When you're in marriage, you're vulnerable to each other. That means you've let down, hopefully you've let down your walls around your heart, that you're open to receive. And being vulnerable is a risk, right? But that's why it's so important.
But it has rewards. Great rewards as well.
But that's why it's so important that you marry the right person. Because being vulnerable does put you in this place where you're like, okay, you have to be able to trust that person. And when you allow yourself to be yoked to someone, first of all, that does not have a spiritual relationship with God, it's going to make it so much harder for you to be vulnerable when they don't even want to be vulnerable to God, right?
That's right.
I mean, so when it talks about husbands loving your wife, it's making reference to that. And when you continue on in Ephesians, it talks about even as Christ also loved the church and gave himself for it. Christ gave himself. He acted out of selflessness. Selflessness. He sacrificed his life for the church, right? And that represents the church is the bride, right?
Yes.
And so when you're comparing a husband and wife, the wife is the bride, okay? And so get what it's saying. He acted out of selflessness. Selflessness does not manipulate. Selflessness does not control. Selflessness does not dictate. Selflessness does not say me. I want it my way. I want it my way. And so when you continue on, it talks about, what does it say, honey?
And so So men ought to love their wives as their own bodies. All right. And so he that loves his wife loveth himself. And so if you really love your wife, you're really loving yourself because you're pouring your life into her. You're giving of yourself. And so that as you give of yourself, men do learn and know how to love themselves. Okay, so you really do want to purposefully not harm yourself or injure yourself. Is that right?
That's true.
I mean, if you're in your right mind, you don't want to purposefully harm yourself, bring injury to yourself,
No.
right? And so you no longer belong to yourself, okay, but you belong to each other. And so if you have crossed these paths and have come to this place and have come to this crossroad in your life, then of course you need to come to grips, do some introspection, determine where you have gotten off course, and what are some of the real issues that's causing you to have such friction. What's in you that you have not resolved, that you feel as though that you have to control the situation because you want to dictate how you want things. But allow the love for each other. Let love flow, because out of that love, eventually you get exactly what you need.
Okay, as we start to wrap this up, I think that's a good point, because I think we as married couples can sometimes do each other a disservice, because when we allow ourselves to, on purpose, in the worst case scenario, hurt our spouse, who are we hurting, honey? We're not just hurting ourselves, right? We're also hurting the other person. But I mean, we're so intertwined. At least we should be intertwined. So anytime you allow, put your spouse in a situation where it's this control thing, since that's what we're talking about, selfishness, you're hurting yourself.
You're hindering your process.
Imagine you stabbing someone, but you're actually stabbing yourself, because
you
are as
growth.
One. You are hindering your growth.
You're hindering your growth.
So when it talks about in scripture, because we're going to wrap this up, it talks about for no man ever hated his own body or his own flesh, but he nourishes it and cherishes it. So when it talks about nourish, that means to promote growth, to provide sustenance or nutrient, to maintain, to support. And then when it talks about cherish, to hold dear, to feel, or to show affection. So if you want to show that towards yourself, again, you're comparing, if you love your body, right? You're supposed to also regard that when you're thinking about your spouse.
And cherish also means to cultivate with care and affection. And when you talk about cultivating, you're really talking about really managing it to a way that you are developing it and you're making it healthy. You're causing life to grow. When you're talking about cultivating, you're really inputting and you're pouring something in that's gonna bring you back a great reward. And so we did speak about in a previous video about forgiveness, and all of these things kind of flow together. And so we really desire for you to be in a healthy place. It is our heart desire to be able to reach you right where you are. Maybe we can say something to help you to take an introspection from a perspective of truth and honesty. Because the hardest people that we have to deal with is ourselves. And it's sometimes the truth hurts, but it's the truth that's going to allow us to become free if we learn to deal with the real issues and deal with truth.
Yes. So with that being said, he talked about taking introspection. So we want to talk about self-evaluation as we wrap up this activity. So we want you to be honest. This is the first thing. If any of the things we said, we gave some examples, extreme examples about possible indicators of maybe your spouse or even yourself operating in a position of selfishness or control, we want you to be honest, sit down in a quiet place, and really think about how you talk to your spouse, how you interact with your spouse. You have to be honest.
Yeah, you do.
I mean, if you are on this journey of wanting to enrich your marriage, no matter what we say, you have to do the work. Okay? We're giving you examples. We're giving you things to think about. But at some point, you have to do the work and you have to be honest. As he says, sometimes the truth may be a little painful, but if it's going to produce greater results, then you're going to have to endure that experience, what you're feeling. So we want you to sit in a quiet place, think about how you talk, like I said, to your spouse, interact with your spouse, be honest, and then journal your thoughts. So you're sitting, you're listening, and you're really evaluating you. Okay? This is not a time to evaluate your spouse, but you're evaluating you. How do you feel you interact with your spouse? And write those things down. Think about previous conversations you may have had with your spouse. Because they'll come back. You'll think about, oh, wow. Maybe that is a selfish way of thinking, or a selfish way of acting, or a selfish way of talking. But it's time now for us, in order to enrich, you have to deal with truth. So we want you to make sure you do this on your own. And we're probably going to end up doing another, because I think selfishness and control is an important issue to discuss. This is our second installment about this topic. But I think we might have to do a third one. We'll see.
Yes.
Yeah.
And also, if you could really, during that introspection and thinking about what you have done, or maybe if you really truly operate in control, think about this for a moment. All right. If your spouse have more freedom speaking to someone else than you, and when you come into the room, the atmosphere change, maybe there's something that you really need to consider. Mm-hmm. If there's something in you that's causing that spouse to feel inadequate, maybe they shut down and don't want to communicate. So we want you to be in a healthy place.
So our final thought is, are there areas where you need to improve in relationship to selfishness or control? If this is not something that you deal with, wonderful. But if it is, if there are areas where you need to improve, then you need to really think about what you can do as you do this introspection, this self-evaluation, okay? So remember, go to our blog, www.enrichingyourmarriageblog.wordpress.com. Again, if you have other topics that you would like for us to consider, we'll think about those. And we'll try to decide if we're going to do those topics. But we're going to be coming back again soon. We took a little more time with this one because it's important.
Yeah, it is.
What do you think? It is important.
It is
Again,
absolutely important.
Our blog, www.enrichingyourmarriageblog.wordpress.com. You can also view us. This is going to be uploaded. It's going to be on YouTube. It's going to be, again, a link on our blog. You can also check us out on a meetup group. Look us up there, Enriching Your Marriage.
Yes.
And we're going to be looking to see you soon, talk to you again soon, and hopefully this is helpful. That's really, like I said at the beginning, our goal is to provide assistance, because this is a heart that we want to see healthy marriages, right?
That's right.
All right. So
shalom, shalom.
Yes.
We speak peace. We speak grace. We speak wholeness. We speak wellness. We speak prosperity and integrity.
Yes.
Peace.
See you soon, right, honey?
Amen.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.